Hello and welcome to the Success Showcase. I'm your host, Eric Lopkin with the Modern Observer Group. And with me, as always, is Chip Januszewski from the Happiness and Success GPS. Chip, how you doing this week?
Doing great. How are you, Eric?
Doing fantastic. We've got real spring-like weather.
Yeah, and I remember to set my clock an hour ahead so I wasn't an hour late for the meeting today. So, like savings time started, light out at 7 o'clock. Good stuff.
Yeah, it's a little dark when we got up this morning, but we'll get used to it and that'll be gone shortly as we head into the change of seasons. And hopefully we'll start seeing leaves showing up on the trees again.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
So we've got a special guest this week. Theresa DeGray has been on here before, but not for several years. She's also joined me on several other podcasts over the years, and I'm so glad to have her back. Theresa, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So, Theresa, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name's Theresa DeGray. I'm an attorney in Connecticut. I practice statewide. I have a physical office location in Milford, Connecticut, and I live in Orange, Connecticut with my husband and my son. And I am also looking forward to it being spring. It was still a little bit cold out there at pickup today.
Yes, it was this morning. So, as I said, Theresa's been with us before. She's an attorney specializing in bankruptcy and divorce. But between her last appearance and now, she's also become a published author. So, Theresa, why don't you tell us about your book?
So I have to make one correction just to correct the record, like we're in court. I can't say that I specialize in anything, and neither can you.
Okay.
Just to be completely ethical about the situation. So my practice areas focus on bankruptcy, divorce, and probate, sometimes some social security disability cases. And yes, since the last time we spoke on a podcast, I did publish a book with a few other attorneys. I wrote the book while I was on my quasi maternity leave after I had my baby. And then it was published sometime in the beginning of 2017.
And what's the book about?
So the book is titled Tiger Tactics, and it is about strategically opening and running small to mid-sized law firms. It's written by a handful of attorneys from across the country. Three of them are from Connecticut. Me, Jay Ruane, and Ryan McKean are from Connecticut. And then Billy Tarasio and Bill, the lawman Bill, is from Florida. And we all met physically once. This was all, of course, pre-pandemic. We went down to New York City. I think it was like April. It was like around this time of 2017 or 18. We all met in person. We had a big dinner around a round table at a fancy restaurant in New York City. It was absolutely amazing to sit down with all of them after we had written the book and published it, and to get to know them personally. So we wrote the book together, but we never met each other. It's a collection of 10 essays. Each author wrote their own 10 essays. So 5 lawyers, 10 essays. You do the math. It's a collection of different essays all about how we opened our firms and how we manage and run our firms, market our firms, and help the clients along the way while we make a living doing what we love.
Fantastic. That's so important because we've talked about this over and over again with both lawyers as well as doctors. With all of the schooling you get, it's all focused on the practice of law, the practice of medicine, and there's very little that you're taught about how to run a practice.
So, interesting fact about me, Eric, is that I actually started working at law firms when I was 16 years old, and I worked for real old school town attorneys that were ingrained in the community, that had practiced for 30 or 40 years, that were quasi-public citizens, as the preamble to the Code of Conduct says. And they taught me everything I needed to know really about how to dress, how to talk to people, where to sign, what to do. And their paralegal, who became a huge mentor to me, who I'm still friends with to this day, taught me everything I needed to know procedurally about being a lawyer. And then I went to law school and I learned the theory about being a lawyer. So I learned the why and the how. But you're absolutely correct. There is nobody and nothing in law school that is going to teach you how to open a practice, how to run a practice. So years ago, Jay Foonberg wrote the seminal treatise on how to start a practice and run the practice. I believe his first book came out in 1974. I just recently found a first edition copy on a shelf in my office. The attorney that I share space with is a little bit older than me, and he has some older books. So I reached out to Jay Foonberg, who wrote this book, this amazing book, and I had it, and it was actually crumpling and falling apart. And I reached out to him and I explained this whole story to him. And he not only sent me a digital copy of the 2020 edition of the book, but he sent me this beautiful long email, and we connected and made this nice little relationship. So when I first started practicing law, there was nobody really there telling me like, this is what you do and that's what you do and all this stuff. I started right at the firm where I was a paralegal. So I went from being 16 years old to pouring coffee and getting the mail and just kind of being a sponge and observing all these people. And then I went away to law school, and when I came back, I went back to another law firm that I had been working at. And I got a job there as a first-year associate, but I didn't know my butt from my elbow. So, you just kind of learn as you go. And then eventually I went out on my own. And if I could quote a movie, you build it and they'll come. That's the quote, right? If you build it, they will come.
Yep. Field of Dreams.
Field of Dreams. Yes. So I literally, the theme of opening my own practice was, if I built it, they'll come. And I just kind of figured if I hung out the shingle and I did what I was supposed to do, and I was ethical, and I just did the next right thing and the next right thing, that it would all work out and I'd be able to help some folks. So I did that. But also personally, I had a bunch of problems and I had to fix them somehow. And the way that I fixed them was I filed bankruptcy. So it was very embarrassing at the time, but somehow I took that story and I started telling people, and I started telling clients, and I started opening up about it. And they started opening up to me. And then I started practicing bankruptcy law. And that story of me filing my own bankruptcy became sort of the, I don't know, not necessarily the theme, but it became the sort of the marketing piece or the marketing language or the marketing literature that went up on my website, my personal story. And I get, even to this day, years and years and years later, clients will call up and they'll say, I just read your story on your website and I'm going through the same thing and I need you to help me. And I want you, because you know exactly what I've been through. And I say yes, and thank you, and I appreciate it. And I'm still glad people are actually reading that. And then I help them. And they get a fresh start through bankruptcy. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me. And it was the best thing that ever happened to them.
No, and it's been a long time since we did the last podcast. So I had to go back to your website and fill myself back in and so on. And that whole story is right there. And obviously, being personal about what's going on there, everybody's personal. Everybody's got their problems and whatever. And your connection as a human being who cares about what they're going through, and you want to share forward what your experience is through your professional experiences is just it's just wonderful. So as far as who your best potential clients are, I'm sure that law firms that are starting to get going are people that you can talk to. I don't know if schools are ready to invite you in to help teach their law students as far as how to get things going. But I mean, who are your target markets, and what are your strategies for getting in there? Because obviously you're dealing with two networkers here.
Yes. So my best referral source for my personal practice is other lawyers. So other lawyers do other things for clients and they get to know the client rather intimately. It's not really like a client or a person is going to show up at your kitchen table or at your conference room table and open up all about their financial woes, right? So most of the other attorneys have gone through some other process with the client and they've sort of teed up the case for me and vetted the client and know that the client has either just gone through a horrific event, a death in the family, a divorce, had COVID, or lost a job or is facing foreclosure, or just has a ton of credit card debt. They know that because they've intimately gone through a process with that client, and now they've teed up the case, vetted the client, and they're handing them off to me. That's the ultimate referral, is a referral from another attorney. Also, I literally just get people walking in off the street. Doctors don't often get walk-ins. Lawyers do. And another kind of misnomer about lawyers is, we may not be doctors, we may not be dealing with all the time immediate life and death situations, but I'll tell you, as a lawyer, we do deal with what people consider to be life and death. If you don't have a place to live, if you don't have credit to go out and sign for a note on a car to get transportation to go to work, these are things that affect your livelihood. So doctors and lawyers were very important. I think that through the process of writing the book and practicing law, I feel like, and I don't mean to like ask for pity, but I think lawyers get a bad rap, and I think that over the course of many years, the respect for the profession has certainly waned. And I want to bring that back. I want people to understand that we do important work, and it is hard to go out there and put yourself out there. It is hard to go out there and help people and throw yourself on the mercy of the court for some other person. And that's really what we do every day, day in and day out. And it's just like doctors. They're dealing with the medical aspects of life and death. We're dealing sometimes with the financial aspects of life or livelihood and death. And in fact, just last week, as an attorney, I'm a conservator for somebody, and 2:00 in the morning, my phone's ringing. It's a nursing home, and one of my conserved clients was dying, and I had to get up and deal with that with the doctor, and in fact, send a fax to the probate court at 2:00 in the morning. So lots of the different things, different aspects of my life happening. But with regard to the book, the marketplace for the book, again, is other lawyers, could be law schools. We did try to send copies to all the local libraries. So, it's not just necessarily, the book is not just necessarily for lawyers starting law firms. I had a fellow BNI networker ask me for a copy of the book last week, and he's a financial guy. So he works for Edward Jones. So it does cross different professions. It is for professionals. It is mostly for professionals who are hired to provide services, not necessarily products.
Fantastic. So now, you briefly mentioned COVID as you were talking there. And just after we all went into lockdown, I made a comment to you that I was going to have to check back with you after all this was over to see how many couples you had met that during lockdown decided they couldn't stand each other anymore and had to go through divorce. Have you actually seen an uptick or a downtick in divorces?
I think that there was maybe a little blip on the screen. It wasn't really something that you could gauge because the courts shut down.